Hollywood has lost one of its brightest, most beloved souls. Diane Keaton, the Oscar-winning actress whose wit, grace, and eccentric style shaped generations, has died at 79. The news sent shockwaves through fans and the film community alike. She wasn't just an actress. She was a feeling. A presence. The kind of performer who could make you laugh in one scene and break your heart in the next. From the quiet heartbreak of The Godfather to the charm of Annie Hall, Diane Keaton redefined what it meant to be authentic on screen. She didn't act the part of a modern woman. She was one, vulnerable yet strong, unconventional yet timeless. But behind those sharp suits and soft smiles was a woman who wrestled with her own struggles. Battles with self-image, health scares, and the loneliness that sometimes shadows even the brightest stars. Her life was not just about fame or film, it was about resilience, about finding beauty in imperfection. In her final months, friends say her light dimmed quietly. There was no grand farewell, no staged goodbye. Just Diane, private, thoughtful, and surrounded by those who truly loved her. And now, as Hollywood mourns the loss of one of its greats, the world is left asking, what really happened to Diane Keaton? How did the woman who taught us to laugh through heartbreak face her own final curtain? This is not just the story of her death, it's the story of her extraordinary life, her battles, her passions, and the love that shaped her. Because Diane Keaton's final act, much like her entire career, reminds us that even when the lights fade, true stars never really disappear. In the first days of October 2025, whispers began to circulate quietly among Diane Keaton's circle of friends. Something was different. The woman known for her boundless energy and warm, infectious laughter seemed unusually tired. Those who had seen her recently said she appeared surprisingly weak, and that the light in her eyes, though still kind, was softer than before. For someone who had faced life with such fearless independence, this sudden frailty was deeply unsettling to those closest to her. Over the years, Diane had always been honest about her health. She had spoken openly about her battles with skin cancer, a struggle that dated back decades, and about her past fight with bulimia, a painful secret she carried through her early years in Hollywood. Yet she had overcome both with grace and humor, turning even her vulnerabilities into lessons of courage for others. Friends say she never let illness define her. Instead, she used her art, her writing, and her family to keep her grounded and hopeful. In her final months, she spent most of her time at home in Los Angeles, surrounded by photographs, old film memorabilia, and the people she loved most: her children, Dexter and Duke, and a small group of longtime friends. They described the atmosphere in her home as calm and comforting, filled with music, laughter, and the smell of the jasmine that grew outside her window. Diane's home had always been her sanctuary, and in her last days, it became a place of quiet peace. On the morning of October 11, 2025, at around 8 o'clock, emergency services were called to her Los Angeles residence. Reports later confirmed that paramedics transported her to a nearby hospital. Despite all efforts, she was pronounced dead at the age of 79. The news spread rapidly across the world, leaving fans and colleagues in disbelief. The entertainment industry paused, almost holding its breath, as tributes poured in from co-stars, directors, and admirers who had grown up watching her on screen. Her family issued a brief statement soon after, asking for privacy and time to grieve. They shared no details about the exact cause of death, saying only that Diane had passed away peacefully. Those who knew her best echoed that sentiment. A close friend described her final days as serene, saying, "She was surrounded by love. That's all she ever wanted, peace and love." In the weeks before her passing, Diane had reportedly spent hours in her garden, tending to her flowers and taking photographs, a lifelong passion she had inherited from her mother. She often spoke of finding beauty in ordinary things, and even as her health declined, she never lost that sense of wonder. Her children were said to be with her often, sharing memories, watching old films, and keeping her company. She was, until the end, exactly who she had always been: curious, creative, and deeply human. When word of her death reached Hollywood, the loss felt personal. Diane Keaton had been a fixture of American cinema for more than 50 years, but beyond the awards and accolades, she was admired for her authenticity. Her departure, though peaceful, left an ache that only those who had been touched by her work could truly understand. And as the world mourned, one truth remained. Diane Keaton lived and died on her own terms, quietly, gracefully, and surrounded by love. Diane Keaton's story began long before Hollywood ever knew her name. Born Diane Hall on January 5, 1946, in Los Angeles, California, she grew up in a modest yet deeply creative home. Her father, Jack Hall, was a civil engineer and real estate broker, while her mother, Dorothy Diane Keaton, was a homemaker who nurtured her children's imaginations. Dorothy loved taking photographs and keeping meticulous scrapbooks, colorful collections of memories, family milestones, and little moments of beauty. For Diane, those scrapbooks became a window into the art of storytelling, and they planted the seed for what would later become her passion for photography and preservation. As a young girl, Diane was curious, bold, and delightfully unconventional. She sang in her church choir and dreamed of being on stage, watching old movies and imagining herself among the glamorous stars of Hollywood's golden age. But unlike many aspiring actresses of her generation, she didn't want to fit a mold, she wanted to break it. After finishing high school, Diane attended Santa Ana College and later Orange Coast College, where she studied acting and theater arts. Yet Los Angeles felt too familiar, too safe, for someone chasing something extraordinary. So, like many dreamers before her, she packed her bags and moved to New York City, determined to make her mark on Broadway. Arriving in Manhattan was both thrilling and terrifying. She took odd jobs to pay rent, waitressing, singing in nightclubs, and taking whatever part-time work she could find, while auditioning for stage roles during the day. It was around this time that she decided to change her last name. When she joined the Actors Equity Association, she discovered another actress named Diane Hall already registered. So she borrowed her mother's maiden name and became Diane Keaton. The name suited her perfectly, simple, strong, and elegant, just like the woman she was becoming. Her big break came when she landed a role in the Broadway production of Hair in 1968. But even that success came with a story that showed Diane's integrity. While other cast members performed nude scenes, she famously refused, a decision that shocked some but defined her as someone who would never compromise her principles for fame. That quiet act of defiance became the first glimpse of the independence that would define her entire career. In those early years, Diane struggled to find her place in an industry that often rewarded conformity. She didn't look or act like the typical ingenue of the late 1960s. She was quirky, tall, and awkwardly charming, but her authenticity made her unforgettable. She began studying under renowned acting teacher Sandy Meisner, who taught her to embrace natural emotion and instinct. It was during this period that she met an equally unconventional young comedian and playwright, Woody Allen, a meeting that would soon change both their lives. Even before Annie Hall turned her into a style icon, Diane was already creating her own visual language. Friends remember her arriving at auditions wearing men's jackets, bowler hats, and oversized vests, looks inspired by vintage menswear she found in thrift shops around the city. She didn't dress to impress, she dressed to express. Years later, her distinctive fashion sense would become a cultural phenomenon, inspiring countless women to embrace individuality over glamour. Those early New York years were tough, filled with rejections, late-night subway rides, and moments of doubt, but they also shaped the fearless woman the world would come to know. Every struggle taught her resilience, every no sharpened her confidence, and every strange outfit became a declaration that she would succeed by being exactly who she was. Long before she was a legend, Diane Keaton was already writing her own rules, one audition, one outfit, and one unforgettable smile at a time. When Diane Keaton first stepped into the role of Kay Adams in The Godfather, 1972, she was still an up-and-coming actress with a handful of theater credits and a few film appearances. No one, not even she, could have imagined how that single role would change her life forever. Cast by director Francis Ford Coppola, she was chosen not for her resemblance to a traditional mafia wife, but for her emotional intelligence and the quiet strength she radiated. In a world of power, greed, and violence, Diane's Kay became the audience's moral anchor, the human face of heartbreak amid corruption. When The Godfather premiered, it didn't just redefine the gangster genre. It introduced the world to Diane Keaton as a serious dramatic actress. Her portrayal of Kay was understated but unforgettable. She wasn't loud, she wasn't flashy. Instead, her presence was hauntingly real. Through her eyes, Viewers witnessed Michael Corleone's transformation from the reluctant son to the ruthless Don, and they felt the cost of his choices. Her quiet despair became one of the most emotional threads in the film, giving it a layer of humanity that balanced its violence. Francis Ford Coppola once said that Keaton was the soul of the Corleone family, and he meant it. While Al Pacino's Michael embodied power and Marlon Brando's Vito symbolized legacy, Keaton's Kay represented conscience, the one voice that reminded viewers of what was being lost in the pursuit of power. Her performance stood out in a film dominated by men, proving that vulnerability can be as powerful as command. 2 years later, she returned in The Godfather Part 2, 1974, deepening the emotional weight of her character. This time, Kay was not just a wife standing in the shadows. She was a woman awakening to the reality of what her husband had become. In one of the series' most chilling scenes, Kay reveals that she had an abortion because she refused to bring another child into a world built on lies and blood. That single moment, quiet, devastating, and raw, revealed Diane Keaton's ability to fuse strength and heartbreak with effortless realism. By the time the second film concluded, she had cemented her place in cinema history. Critics hailed her for bringing compassion and moral conflict to a story otherwise ruled by violence. Her performance became one of the emotional cornerstones of the trilogy, helping to elevate The Godfather from a crime saga to a family tragedy. Years later, in The Godfather Part 3, 1990, Keaton returned once again as Kay, older, wiser, and still bearing the scars of her past. The film revisited the pain and tenderness between Kay and Michael as they navigated years of guilt and unresolved love. In her scenes with Pacino, the chemistry was electric yet weary, their shared history etched in every glance. When Kay tells Michael, "I still love you, but I dread you," the line felt like both confession and curse, the perfect summation of decades of betrayal and devotion. Off-screen, Keaton later admitted she felt connected to Kay's emotional journey. Like her character, she knew what it meant to love deeply but remain independent. There was always something real in her portrayals, a vulnerability that didn't need to be performed because it was already there within her. Through the Godfather trilogy, Diane Keaton didn't just play a role, she embodied an era of filmmaking where women in Hollywood began to be seen not as accessories to a story, but as its moral center. Her quiet defiance, her empathy, and her depth made her unforgettable. And in the shadowed world of the Corleones, it was Diane Keaton's Kay Adams who reminded audiences that even in darkness, love and conscience still have a voice. When Diane Keaton met Woody Allen in the late 1960s, it was not at a glamorous Hollywood party or film premiere, but on a stage in New York City. Both were part of the Broadway production of Play It Again, Sam, a romantic comedy about a neurotic man haunted by the ghost of Humphrey Bogart. Keaton played his love interest, and from the first rehearsal, there was an unmistakable spark between them. They were opposites in many ways. Woody was shy, self-deprecating, and cerebral, while Diane was spontaneous, funny, and brimming with quirky energy. Yet together, they made perfect sense. Their off-screen romance began quietly, almost shyly. They were both in their 20s, struggling artists trying to make something of themselves in New York. Keaton often joked that what first attracted her to Woody was his brilliance, but friends said it was really his vulnerability, the same quality that drew audiences to both of them. They shared late-night walks, diner meals, and conversations about life, movies, and the absurdity of love. It was a romance that felt real, raw, and deeply human. Two misfits who somehow made each other feel at home. When Play It Again, Sam was adapted into a film in 1972, Keaton reprised her role, and their on-screen chemistry was undeniable. What audiences didn't realize then was that they were watching something close to reality, a love story unfolding in real time. The success of that movie marked the beginning of a creative partnership that would span decades and define both of their careers. In the years that followed, they made a string of films together: Sleeper, 1973, a science fiction comedy where they played lovers caught in a futuristic world, and Love and Death, 1975, a hilarious philosophical parody that mixed slapstick with existential musings. Each film revealed something new about their connection: a rhythm, a language of glances and pauses that felt effortless. Woody wrote roles for her that no other actress could have played, and she brought to them a warmth and wit that softened his sharp humor. Then came Annie Hall in 1977, the film that would not only define their careers but also become a cultural landmark. What began as a simple romantic comedy evolved into something deeply personal. The story of Alvy Singer, a neurotic comedian, and Annie Hall, his free-spirited lover, was, in truth, a reflection of Woody and Diane themselves. Their humor, their disagreements, their affection, and ultimately, their heartbreak. Keaton didn't just act in Annie Hall. She was Annie Hall. The clothes she wore, oversized vests, men's trousers, floppy hats, weren't costumes. They were Diane's actual wardrobe. She brought her own sense of style, her own mannerisms, even her middle name, Hall, to the character. What made Annie so unforgettable wasn't glamour or perfection, but honesty. She was awkward, insecure, loving, funny, all at once. Audiences saw themselves in her, and that authenticity turned Diane Keaton into a symbol of modern womanhood. The film swept the 1978 Academy Awards, winning Best Picture, Best Director, Best Screenplay, and earning Keaton the Oscar for Best Actress. It was her first nomination and her first win, a validation of years of hard work and individuality. When she stepped onto the stage to accept the award, she seemed humbled, even surprised. To the world, she was now a superstar, but to Woody, she remained the same eccentric woman who could make him laugh in ways no one else could. Their romantic relationship ended not long after Annie Hall, but the end of their romance didn't mean the end of their connection. In fact, it evolved into something deeper, a lifelong friendship rooted in respect and shared history. In interviews, Woody Allen has often described Diane as a person who's impossible not to adore, admitting that she was the muse who inspired some of his best work. Diane, in turn, called him the love of my life, though she never meant it in the traditional sense. To her, love was not confined to romance or marriage. It was about understanding, loyalty, and the comfort of being seen for who you truly are. Their bond endured through time and controversy, through changing eras and shifting careers. When others drifted away from Woody, Diane remained his steadfast friend, not because she agreed with everything he said or did, but because she believed in the human being behind the headlines. They shared a trust that few in Hollywood ever find. For Diane Keaton, Woody Allen wasn't just a chapter in her love life, he was the thread that ran through her artistic identity. Their relationship showed that love doesn't always end with separation. Sometimes, it transforms into something even more profound. Theirs was a love story that outlasted youth, fame, and failure. It became a partnership built on laughter, art, and acceptance, the kind of love that doesn't burn out but settles into something steady and enduring. And in a way, Annie Hall was their eternal memory, a time capsule of two people who found, lost, and forever remembered each other. For millions who watched that film, Diane Keaton and Woody Allen didn't just play lovers. They were love itself, imperfect, beautiful, and real. For decades, Diane Keaton was the face of love in American cinema. The woman who made us believe that romance could be both funny and profound, that two imperfect people could find magic in their differences. Yet behind the screen, her own story told a different truth. Despite her many on-screen love affairs, Keaton never married. It wasn't out of cynicism or loneliness, but out of a deep sense of independence, a lifelong desire to live life on her own terms. In interviews, Keaton often spoke candidly about why she chose to remain single. She once confessed, "I don't think I was ever marriage material. I was too afraid of losing myself, of changing too much." Her words reflected not bitterness, but honesty. For Diane, love was something to be experienced, not owned. She believed in connection, not commitment for the sake of convention. Hollywood may have painted her as the eternal romantic, but her real-life romance was with freedom, the ability to live, create, and love without boundaries. Still, she wasn't without passion or companionship. Her name was linked with some of Hollywood's most famous men, each relationship unique, each leaving its own mark on her heart. Her romance with Woody Allen was the first great love of her life, born out of creativity and humor. After him came Warren Beatty, her co-star in Reds, 1981, a sweeping historical epic that earned her another Academy Award nomination. Beatty was charming, intense, and notoriously difficult to pin down, but Diane was drawn to his intellect and energy. She once described him as a man who could do everything, act, direct, lead, and still be fascinatingly insecure. Then there was Al Pacino, the smoldering co-star from the Godfather films. Their chemistry was palpable, both on and off the screen. Keaton later admitted that she had fallen deeply in love with him, calling him the love of my life in one of her most emotional interviews. They dated on and off for years during the 1970s and 1980s, a relationship that was as intense as it was complicated. She once said that she wanted him to marry her, but Pacino wasn't ready for that step. "I wanted more," she said, "but he wasn't the marrying kind. He was always somewhere else, inside his art." Their breakup wasn't dramatic. It was simply the quiet realization that they were two artists who loved each other deeply but couldn't fit into the same life. Still, they remained close friends long after their romance ended. Even decades later, Pacino spoke warmly of her, describing her as the most unique woman I've ever known. Their connection endured, not defined by romance anymore, but by shared history, mutual respect, and the memory of what once was. Her rumored flings with Jack Nicholson added another layer of fascination. Their playful chemistry in Something's Gotta Give, 2003, reignited public curiosity about Diane's love life. The film's late-in-life romance mirrored the actress's own reality, a woman rediscovering passion and joy long after others assumed it was too late. Fans hoped their on-screen spark would translate into real life, but both Keaton and Nicholson laughed off the speculation. Still, Diane admitted that Jack was irresistible, and still is. By the time she reached her 50s, Diane's priorities had shifted. Her life took a new direction when she became a mother. In 1996, she adopted her daughter Dexter, and 5 years later, her son Duke. Becoming a mother in her 50s was unconventional, but for Diane, it was the most natural choice she'd ever made. "It's the greatest role I've ever played," she said. "Motherhood changed everything. It made me less selfish, more patient, more open to love." Her children became her world, grounding her in ways that fame and romance never could. Friends say that in her later years, she was happiest at home, surrounded by her kids, her dogs, her photography, and her beloved collection of hats. She was deeply close to her family and still made time for her oldest friends, including Pacino, Alan, and Jane Fonda. Those who visited her described her home as a museum of memories, filled with photographs, old scripts, and keepsakes from a life richly lived. Though she was never anyone's wife, Diane Keaton was loved by millions, not just for her beauty or talent, but for her refusal to compromise who she was. She represented a kind of freedom that inspired countless women, proof that you didn't need a husband to have a full, meaningful life. Her love wasn't defined by marriage certificates or romantic endings. It was expressed in her art, her children, her friendships, and her courage to be utterly herself. In the end, Diane Keaton's private life was exactly what she wanted it to be: authentic, unpredictable, and full of love in all its imperfect forms. And perhaps that's why audiences adored her so deeply. Because behind the laughter, the roles, and the glamour, she lived her truth with grace and without apology. Behind Diane Keaton's bright smile and effortless charm was a woman who fought some of life's hardest battles, quietly, courageously, and without self-pity. Her journey through Hollywood wasn't paved with endless glamour. It was filled with moments of struggle, self-doubt, and deep reflection. For all her success, Keaton often said she felt like an outsider in an industry obsessed with perfection. She was never afraid to admit that her confidence had been hard-earned, the result of surviving years of insecurity, illness, and emotional pain. In her 20s, when her career was just beginning, Keaton battled bulimia, a secret she kept hidden for years. At the time, she was a young actress trying to meet impossible beauty standards, working under constant scrutiny from casting directors and critics. She later revealed that the disorder consumed much of her early life, endless cycles of binging and purging that left her exhausted and ashamed. "It was a lonely addiction," she confessed. "It took up all my time, all my thoughts. I was obsessed with food, and with the idea of being perfect." For Diane, bulimia wasn't just about weight, it was about control, about trying to manage the chaos of fame and expectation. Her recovery took years, but she faced it with the same courage that would define her life. Over time, she found peace in self-acceptance. She began to speak openly about her experience, not as a confession, but as a message to others struggling in silence. "You don't have to be perfect," she said. "You just have to be real." Those words became her quiet rebellion against an industry built on illusions. But her struggles didn't end there. In her later years, Diane faced several skin cancer scares, undergoing multiple surgeries and treatments. She often spoke about her lifelong battle with sun damage, admitting that in her youth, she was careless, spending hours in the California sun without sunscreen, chasing the golden tan that was once considered beautiful. When doctors began removing small cancerous spots from her face, she realized how fragile beauty really was. Rather than hiding it, she used her experience to raise awareness about skin health and self-care. "It's not about vanity," she once said. "It's about survival." Amid her health battles, Diane also wrestled with something far more personal: self-doubt. Despite her fame, her Oscar, and her iconic status, she often questioned her worth. In interviews, she admitted to feeling inadequate, especially in a culture that worshipped youth and perfection. "Hollywood doesn't make it easy for women to age," she once said. "You start to feel invisible, like you've outlived your purpose." But Diane refused to play by those rules. Instead of chasing youth, she became a symbol of aging with grace. She never tried to hide her wrinkles or dye away her silver hair. Her trademark style, the hats, the glasses, the tailored suits, evolved, but her essence never changed. She laughed at the idea of cosmetic surgery, saying, "I'd rather look like myself than someone I don't recognize." In doing so, she gave countless women permission to embrace their age, to see beauty in authenticity rather than artifice. Her memoir, Then Again, published in 2011, pulled back the curtain on her private world. It wasn't a tale of fame or Hollywood secrets, it was a love letter to her late mother, Dorothy Keaton Hall, a woman who had filled her life with creativity, photographs, and unconditional love. Through her mother's journals, Diane reflected on her own journey, as a daughter, an artist, and a mother herself. The book revealed a tender, introspective side of her that the public rarely saw. It showed that behind the eccentric humor and quick wit was a woman deeply shaped by her family and by loss. In Then Again, Diane wrote, "My mother lived a life I wanted to understand, a life of devotion, of art, of joy in small things. I learned from her that it's okay to be flawed, to be searching, to never quite arrive." That sentence became the soul of her philosophy. She had learned that imperfection wasn't a weakness, it was where the truth lived. Over the years, Keaton's candor about her struggles made her a feminist icon of a different kind. She didn't preach, she didn't perform, she simply lived honestly. She showed that women could grow older without apology, that vulnerability could coexist with strength, and that authenticity could be the boldest act of all. Through illness, insecurity, and the relentless pressure of fame, Diane Keaton stood tall, not because she was unbreakable, but because she had learned how to bend and still stand. Her life became a quiet revolution, proof that the most powerful beauty is not found in perfection, but in truth. Diane Keaton's career was not defined by one role or one decade, it was a mosaic of performances, each revealing a new layer of her talent, humor, and humanity. From the moment she entered Hollywood, she seemed determined to defy every label the industry tried to place on her. Over more than 50 years, she crafted one of the most unique and enduring careers in film, one that bridged generations and blurred the line between actress, artist, and icon. After The Godfather made her a star, Keaton proved she wasn't afraid to take creative risks. Her collaboration with Warren Beatty in Reds, 1981, showcased her ability to move beyond comedy and embody a woman of fierce intellect and conviction. Her portrayal of journalist Louise Bryant, a woman caught between passion and politics, earned her another Academy Award nomination and cemented her reputation as one of the most versatile actresses of her generation. Beatty, who directed the film, later said that Keaton brought a rare emotional intelligence to every scene, the kind of depth that couldn't be taught. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, she balanced art and accessibility with rare finesse. In Baby Boom, 1987, she played a driven businesswoman whose life changes after unexpectedly becoming a mother, a role that resonated deeply with working women everywhere. Marvin's Room, 1996, brought her back to more serious drama, where she portrayed a woman caring for her dying father and estranged sister, earning yet another Oscar nomination for her emotionally raw performance. But perhaps her most beloved late-career role came in Something's Gotta Give, 2003, opposite Jack Nicholson. As Erica Barry, a witty, middle-aged playwright navigating romance and heartbreak, Keaton reminded audiences that love, laughter, and desire don't fade with age. Her performance, filled with both comedy and vulnerability, earned her a Golden Globe win and an Oscar nomination, proving that her star power remained undimmed well into her 50s. In later years, she brought her trademark warmth and humor to films like The Family Stone, 2005, Morning Glory, 2010, and Book Club, 2018, where she starred alongside Jane Fonda, Candice Bergen, and Mary Steenburgen. Each film showed that Keaton had mastered something rare, the ability to make audiences laugh while also making them feel seen. She wasn't playing glamorous fantasy versions of women. She was playing real women, strong, quirky, flawed, and unforgettable. Across her career, Keaton earned dozens of nominations and awards, including an Academy Award, 2 BAFTAs, and multiple Golden Globes, spanning more than 5 decades. Yet her influence went far beyond accolades. Actresses from Meryl Streep to Emma Stone have credited her as a role model, not just for her performances but for her unapologetic individuality. She showed that women could lead films, age gracefully, and still remain magnetic on screen. Outside of acting, Keaton was a creative force in many other ways. She published several books, from her deeply personal memoir Then Again to her photography collections California Romantica and House. Her love of visual storytelling began with her mother's scrapbooks and grew into a passion for photography and design. She became an advocate for historic preservation in Los Angeles, restoring old homes and helping protect the city's architectural history. Her commitment to sustainability and the environment reflected her belief that art and responsibility should coexist. And then there was her fashion, that timeless, fearless style that no one else could quite replicate. Her wide-brimmed hats, oversized suits, and neckties became as iconic as her performances. What started as a personal quirk became a cultural statement, proof that confidence and individuality never go out of style. Designers and fans alike have called her a fashion philosopher, a woman who dressed not to impress others, but to express herself. Even in her later years, Diane Keaton never retreated from the spotlight. She continued to act, post cheerful glimpses of her life on social media, and share her signature humor with fans around the world. There was a joy in the way she lived, an eccentricity that made her both relatable and extraordinary. Her legacy lives not only in her films but in her attitude toward life, fearless, funny, and free. Diane Keaton taught generations that true beauty isn't about youth, true love isn't about possession, and true success isn't about perfection. It's about living authentically, laughing loudly, and daring to be yourself, always. When the news broke on October 11, 2025, that Diane Keaton had passed away at the age of 79, the world stopped, just for a moment, to remember the woman who had made millions laugh, cry, and believe in love again and again. The announcement rippled through Hollywood like a wave of disbelief. For so many, Keaton had always seemed eternal, a living symbol of grace, wit, and unapologetic individuality. Even in her 70s, she was still vibrant, full of humor, still posting her playful videos online, still that same warm, quirky soul who could make anyone smile. In the hours that followed, tributes poured in from every corner of the entertainment world. Directors, actors, and longtime friends flooded social media with messages of love and grief. Al Pacino, her dear friend and one-time love, released a simple but heartfelt statement. Diane's spirit was one of a kind, pure, fearless, full of grace. She could make you laugh in the darkest moment, and she saw beauty where others didn't. I will miss her deeply. His words captured not just the loss of a friend but the passing of an era, one they had shared since the Godfather days more than 50 years earlier. Goldie Hawn, another Hollywood icon and lifelong admirer, wrote, "She made aging look magnificent. Diane lived her life like a poem, beautiful, funny, and completely her own." Those who knew Keaton best often said that her greatest gift wasn't her acting, but her ability to be absolutely herself, joyful, vulnerable, and full of contradictions. And then there was Woody Allen, the man who had once been her great love and forever friend. Though he made no formal public statement, sources close to him said he told friends privately, "I lost the love of my life, my best friend." Their story had begun in the late 1960s, long before either of them were famous, and it had endured for over 5 decades, through breakups, triumphs, and time. Even when the romance faded, the affection never did. In many ways, his words echoed what audiences felt. Diane Keaton wasn't just someone we watched, she was someone we knew, someone we felt we'd grown up with. Plans for memorial services began soon after the news broke. A private family gathering was organized in Los Angeles, attended by her children, Dexter and Duke, and a few of her closest friends. Sources described it as simple, elegant, and intimate, just as she would have wanted. There were no red carpets or flashing cameras, only soft music, old photographs, and laughter through tears as friends shared stories from her extraordinary life. One of her children reportedly said, "She taught us to love life, not in the big moments, but in the little ones. The laughter, the dinners, the walks. That's what she wanted us to remember." As Hollywood prepares to celebrate her legacy publicly, the tributes continue. Fellow actresses have credited her for changing the way women are seen on screen. Critics call her one of the last true originals, someone who never tried to fit in, but instead inspired others to stand out. Her performances in Annie Hall, Something's Gotta Give, and Reds are being revisited, not as relics of the past, but as timeless studies of what it means to be human, funny, flawed, and full of heart. Diane Keaton will be remembered as more than an actress. She was a director, a photographer, a mother, an activist, and a free spirit who lived life with curiosity and courage. She turned awkwardness into charm, aging into art, and loneliness into laughter. In a world obsessed with perfection, she remained gloriously, defiantly real. As the lights dim over Los Angeles and the reels of her greatest films play once more, one truth shines brighter than ever. Diane Keaton never played by the rules, she wrote her own. And in doing so, she left behind not just a legacy of cinema, but a legacy of soul. In the end, Diane Keaton's story wasn't about a perfect romance or a fairytale ending. It was about love in its truest, most human form. She never married, never walked down an aisle, never settled into the version of happiness that movies so often promise. But what she did find was something far richer. A love that reached across generations, beyond the screen, and into the hearts of everyone who ever watched her smile, stumble, or fall in love on camera. Her life was built around connection, the kind that doesn't fade with time. She loved her children, Dexter and Duke, with every ounce of her being. She loved her friends, Al Pacino, Woody Allen, Goldie Hawn, not just for their fame or shared history, but because they filled her world with laughter, loyalty, and understanding. And she loved her audience, the millions who saw a bit of themselves in her characters. The awkward dreamers, the late bloomers, the lovers who never quite got it right but never stopped trying. Her films taught us that love isn't perfect, it's messy, funny, sometimes painful, but always worth it. Through Annie Hall, Something's Gotta Give, and so many others, Diane showed that connection matters more than chemistry, and that being authentic is the greatest act of romance there is. She taught us that it's okay to be vulnerable, to laugh at ourselves, and to keep believing, even when life doesn't go the way we planned. Even in death, Diane Keaton remains a symbol of courage and individuality. Proof that you can live on your own terms and still leave a legacy of love. She aged without fear, created without apology, and loved without condition. Her laughter, her eccentricity, and her deep sincerity left the world brighter than she found it. And so, as the credits fade on her extraordinary life, one truth remains clear. Diane Keaton didn't just play roles, she was the story. A story of humor, heartbreak, resilience, and a heart that never stopped believing in love. Even now, somewhere beyond the lights of Hollywood, you can almost hear her laugh, that unmistakable, joyful laugh, reminding us that love, in all its imperfect beauty, never really ends.